property. We have a couple of rental properties, and we're looking for a mobile home park for our next investment. Your park is only 2.5 hours away from us. It's between 50 and 75 lots. We'd be very interested in purchasing your park. Have you ever thought about selling? And I think that went pretty well for him. He had a lot of reception with that. I think by one, creating a personal connection. Like it's just me and my wife. We're not some entity in California that's going to come in with cash and never even see the asset. We really care. And a lot of these sellers built the parks themselves. So that is important to them, who they're passing it down to. They want to know who they're passing it down to. And then the other side is just being very specific. Like, we are looking for a mobile home park. Here's what we're looking for. Here's why your park fits our criteria. I think that also went a long ways in making them understand that we were very serious and we weren't just, sort of cold calling. And then I guess one other thing to say is a lot of sellers are getting a lot of direct mail right now. So even the seller that we bought from was like, oh, I have a whole pile of letters or people saying they want to buy my park. And I really think just that personal relationship and calling, it took about 8 months from the time he first started talking with her until we actually closed. So, just following up and calling and asking about them and their children and all those things, creating that relationship really helped a lot.
So Amanda, someone's asking if a vacant space can ever be value add. For example, they're saying if a space can rent for $400 monthly, but it's vacant, can it be factored into the sales price somehow?
Got it. Yes, in mobile home parks, a vacant lot can be factored into the sales price. And there are a couple of thoughts on this. So in theory, because it's the NOI, then it's not producing any income, so it's zero. In actuality, you do give some sort of amount for those vacant lots for the most part. So you're probably doing some, like, let's say you have a half vacant park, you have 100 lots available and 50 of them are filled in. You're not going to give them no money for that potential, especially if you're going to come in and give those 50 lots. So you probably would do, in my case, what I would run that as the NOI on the income producing lots. And then I would add some small amount for each empty lot and add that to the value of the park. We also would do a similar thing with park owned homes versus tenant owned homes. So you want to run the NOI numbers on what the park owns. Like the income producing piece, the lot rents, not the park owned home rent. You want to run your NOI using sorry, I'm trying to look at the chat too, just the lot rent. And then at the back end, once you get your NOI value, then you can add some amount for, park owned homes or vacant lots or something like that. Let me know if that does not answer questions here.
I think that answered exactly.
Perfect. Okay. How does the lender see those vacant lots? Well, not as income producing, but honestly, I don't know. At least in our park, we had 5 vacant lots, and that wasn't factored in because the income was plenty high, right? They're working on the ratio, like you have to be like 1.25 or 1.2 or whatever times the amount of your mortgage is really what they care about. I don't know how they factor in vacant lots. I'll tell you what, they don't like park owned homes. They're not going to give you anything for the park owned homes. They'll make you bring more money into the table for a park owned home. Cool. All right, so here is some pictures of our park right when we bought it. It's a 52 lot park, 47 lots are occupied. The seller, Betty, her and one of her sons was managing it themselves. They were doing everything. People were paying rent at her house every month. They would have to drive to her house and give her rent in cash or something like that. And the rents were below market. There was public water and septics. and the public water was just absorbed by the park. As you can see, there was a lot of trash and abandoned vehicles. And Betty and her husband built this park in the early 90s. Betty's husband had passed away several years ago, and she was managing it herself, and she was tired, right? She was ready to retire. So she just wanted to take her income. I don't think she had enough energy to care about abandoned trucks or, trash or something like that. So that's sort of the picture of the park. And the septic systems were also neglected. They were there, but they were neglected. Let's see. How do you determine the market rent value for each lot? Oh, that's a great question, Keith. We call other parks in the area and see, hey, I want to move my home now. I mean, don't sound like an investor when you call, right? But hey, I'm looking to move my home into this park, or do you have anything for rent right now? Do you have any homes available? What is your rent? And then you want to also ask those questions like, what do they include? Is the water included? Is the sewer included? Is electrical included? All of those things. So call all the local parks in the area, and that'll give you a good idea. Does the age of the mobile home parks that are fully renovated make a difference to the buyer? Yes. We didn't buy any park-owned homes. That's the ideal case. It's not owning any park-owned homes, but it does make a difference. So if we're talking about a negotiated price for a park and the park had some park-owned homes, again, we would do that NOI calculation on lot rent only, and then we would come up with a price per home of those park-owned homes and buy them that way. And of course, the newer homes are going to be worth a bit more. Like maybe we would pay up to like $10,000 for a pretty newer home, whereas for some of these older homes, like the ones in our park are pretty old, we would probably give like $1,000, $1,500 a piece if they were park owned. Yes, Evan, I will make a note to talk about like park owned versus non-park owned. Yeah. I'll talk about that for sure. That's a good one. Okay, cool. So how did we fund the deal? We paid $590 for it. That was the price we negotiated with Betty. We got pretty favorable terms. I was happy with 20% down, 20-year AM. We'd been hearing things like 35% down for a mobile home park. So I was very happy with 20% down, interest rate a little bit over 4%, a 5-year call, which basically means in commercial real estate, every so many years, in our case 5, we have to revisit the terms of the loan. If interest rates have gone up, then we're probably gonna have to pay more, and they'll basically reset the loan at that point and do another 20-year AM, updated interest rate, that sort of thing on your new balance is basically how it works in commercial funding. And then we personally guaranteed this loan. That basically means if we do not pay the mortgage, they can come after our house, our retirement accounts, right, whatever they want. This personally guaranteed piece is a big deal. And it's one of the, in my mind, like a big trade-off that you're making when you're doing mobile home parks. So I think of mobile home parks as, like you have your retirement communities, super nice communities, maybe in Florida with paved roads and they have curbs and sidewalks. That is not the asset that we buy. You can get those assets funded by Freddie or Fannie. They will actually pick those up now. The type of all age community located in here, in North Carolina, that is never going to be, I shouldn't say never. At this point, Fannie and Freddie are not picking up those types of loans. So they need to stay on the books of the bank that is giving you the loan, which means you'll need to go with probably a small local lender. We used Atlantic Union Bank, which is out west. Our park is in Wilkesboro, North Carolina. So it's out out west there. One note on this, I found it important to go with a lender who already had at least one mobile home park on their books. Because if you think about it, when you're talking with the lender at the bank, they're sort of a salesperson. I mean, don't get me wrong, they don't want to waste a month telling you they're going to fund something and then not do it. That's a waste of their own time. But also, they want that, they get a cut, they get, some bonus or whatever they get, right? They want to bring in more money and do more loans, but they're not the underwriters. And I didn't want to get to a point where you're about to close and the underwriters come back and say, oh, you know what, we're just not comfortable with that asset class, we're not going to do this. So for that reason, we wanted to go with a bank who already had at least one mobile home park on their books, and Atlantic Union does do mobile home parks. Let's see, anything, yeah. Looks like Denise can fund for mobile home parks, so interesting there. What is it, bank loan or seller financing? Oh yeah, it was a bank loan. So Betty was completely not interested in seller financing, although that would be a great option for parks as well. Yes, I think I answered the other part, so that's good. All right, now into sort of the turnaround phase. Like we've talked about what the park was, and now we can talk about what we did to it. I'll start actually by saying we bought this park in like the first week of April of 2020. The entire world is in lockdown. We're terrified. We had so many conversations like, are people going to be able to pay us? Like, nobody knew what was going to happen at that time. And I was running the numbers like, all right, how many people have to not pay us before we can't pay our mortgage? And it was like 40% of the parks were like, all right, we feel good about this. One thing we did is not increase lot rents on day one. We would have, but in early April of 2020, we were worried people weren't even going to be able to pay us at all. So we just kind of kept things as is for 6 months. So the lot rents were at 160. We took them to 175. Now they're at 190. And next April, we'll bring them to full market of 200. And then from there, it'll be the standard rent increases, 3 to 5%, or with the way inflation's going right now, perhaps a bit more than that. But probably if it weren't like height of COVID, we would have done like 190 day one, at the 1 year point, go to 200. But essentially 160 is where they were, 190 is where they are, 200 is where they're going. And I will say that it seems easy enough to raise the rents, but a lot of the owners of these parks, as you guys probably know from any other asset, they just don't do it because it's easy to do it on paper, but it's a lot harder to go and raise the rents on people that you've known forever or have relationships with or that sort of thing. They'll get backlash. So a lot of times people just don't do it, even though it is fair market rent that all the other parks are charging. Okay, water billing. There were sub-meters installed at our park, and they were sort of being used. At a lot of parks, it's just billed from the municipality to the park, and the park just sort of eats that as an expense. And that's one of the opportunities we always look for when I'm underwriting, is to be able to bill back utilities, especially water. The seller, Betty, she had sub-meters, so she knew how much water each lot was using. She allowed people to use 3,000 gallons without penalty. And then if they use more than that, she would just start assessing fines at her whim. So if somebody used 4,000 gallons a month, she might give them a $15 fine to tell them, like, don't do that again. And if they did it the following month, she might increase the fine to $25. That is illegal. That is not something that can be done. In North Carolina, there's a water commission, and they say how much you can charge each tenant. So you definitely have to go through them, or else you can get sued. And a class action lawsuit is definitely not something that we want. That can definitely bankrupt you really quickly. So in this park, the water expenses were about $1,000 a month before we took over. They're about the same now. They're about $1,000 a month. The amount that we bill and then get paid for the water is a little bit higher than that. I'll talk about that in a second. And then we do pay a third-party billing company $100 a month to do the bills for us, to actually create the bills and mail them out. So that actually turned, by doing this sub-metering and billing, it actually turned $1,000 expense into a small gain. So that $1,049 at an 8 cap is over 150 grand of value added to the park in just this item. So that was that, and raising the rents were just these huge things in increasing the value of the park. Good question, Keith. Is the third-party company reading the water meters for you? No, you can get people to do that. It was more expensive to do that. Our park manager reads the meters on a monthly basis and then inputs the readings to our third company. I have it written down here. Vitality is who we use. So on Vitality's website, he inputs all of the meter readings for that month, and then Vitality creates the water bills. And they have to, by law, they have so many things in them. It has to have like last month's reading, this month's reading, you know, the lot name, the amount you're getting billed for water, and then there's a $3.75 admin charge that can be charged, and a lot of times that is sort of helpful in paying sort of the third-party billing expenses. All right, let's see. Oh, one other thing I wanted to mention, well, two things. One, we actually do the collection. So this company does not do the collection for us. Our manager inputs the amounts that the company tells him are owed by each lot into our rent management system. We use something called Schedule of My Rent. It's pretty good. It's a lot more robust than, Cozy, or I guess apartments.com now, and not as expensive as Rent Manager. So it was a really good sort of intermediate for this 50 lot park management. I do think we're going to end up with Rent Manager because we're, getting more parks. So it just makes sense with scale to get Rent Manager, but Schedule My Rent has been good for us for now. The other thing I wanted to mention is RUBS. So you guys have probably heard, the two options if you want to bill back utilities is to submeter or to implement RUBS. Somebody probably knows what the RUBS acronym is. I do not even remember what it is, but it's essentially ratio-based billing. So if we had, $1,000 water expense for the park, but we didn't have those submeters to know how much each lot used, then maybe we would bill a certain amount to homes with 2 bedrooms in them, and then bill more to homes with 3 bedrooms in them, and you do it on that ratio-based system. That is, thank you, Evan, that is not legal in North Carolina. You cannot bill water by a RUBS system. So just so you know, if you guys are underwriting or looking at value add of properties in North Carolina, that is not actually an option. All right, let's see. Those are some big ones. Cleaning up the park. So we stole this idea or borrowed it from Frank and Dave. If you guys have heard of, Frank Rolfe and Dave Reynolds, they're the guys that do Mobile Home Park University, and they own thousands of lots. And they like to do a park cleanup weekend because, as you saw from the pictures, there are often a lot of just debris and junk and stuff lying around. So we brought in dumpsters, we brought in sets of 2, and just, before we had our manager start going around and giving citations for people to get junk cleaned up, we wanted to give them a chance to clean it up first. So we put out 2 dumpsters. They got filled up quickly, called the company to get 2 more. They got filled up, did 2 more. So we did 6 dumpsters over the course of a weekend. And just, allowed people to get anything they wanted. We didn't ask questions inside your house, outside of your house, whatever you wanted, just get it cleaned up. Michael says, what is a typical vacancy factor? Michael, do you mean, well, I guess there are 2 different things there. It's the lot, is the lot vacant, or is it just a vacancy within a lot that's typically occupied? You'll know the vacancy going in of the empty lots. You'll definitely ask that before you give them an offer price. For the home, and by the way, the mobile homes, once they're there, they're basically there to stay. And then when you go to, when you think through, like, are people going to move out or move in? The homes are really there to stay. I factored in a 5% vacancy. We have been at 100% collections since we purchased our park. And so that's a nice bonus that we've had that we didn't know. From the pro forma, when you sell, honestly, if you don't have vacancy, then I would not put in anything on the pro forma if you're going to sell the asset, because it should be based on what you've truly had as your net operating income, over the past 1 to 2 years. So I would put your full rents there. Okay. Septic systems. So this park has 37 septic systems for the 52 lots. So most systems are 1-to-1, meaning one lot has one septic system. And then some of our lots are 2-to-1, meaning 2 lots share one septic system. A very important part of the due diligence, if you have septic systems, is understanding the septic systems. I mean, that is so critical to what you are purchasing. That's the most expensive piece there. And in order to do inspections on septic systems, they need to be pumped. So you'll want to have somebody pump all of the tanks, do a visual inspection. You can see, we had a couple of cracks in tanks and a drain field that looked like it was failing. So we knew about those things going in to the park, and that's really important to understand. I will say, this was a big sticking point during due diligence. Of note, one thing that you guys can do way better than what we did was to set expectations up front. I think Jonathan was so excited that we had this park under contract. He didn't have a phone call with Betty to say, hey, here are the next steps. We're sending an electrician in, we're sending a plumber in, we're having the septic tanks pumped, we're doing all of these things. And so as they would come up, he would tell her, hey, here's what we're going to do next. And she wanted nothing to do with any of it. She really, really didn't want anybody to know she was selling, because if we backed out, she was going to keep it. She wasn't going to sell it. So rightfully so, she didn't want to cause any alarm, but you have to inspect the septic tanks. So we actually told her we were going to pump them and inspect them. And she said, no, you're not. And then she proceeded to call both of the septic companies that were local and told them, do not set foot on my land to help them with this inspection. So that didn't go well. The deal almost fell through. Jonathan had to talk her off of a ledge. She agreed to let us pump 20 tanks. We got to choose which ones we were pumping and inspecting. And in order to do that, we agreed to give $50,000 over to the lawyers to hold. She was very worried that somehow we would come and destroy property by pumping these septic systems. So that's how we got through that. We had, of what you're seeing here, 20 of them were pumped and inspected prior to buying. The other 17 were pumped and inspected after we closed. And I will say we got so lucky. we try to be strategic with the 20 we chose, like the oldest ones, all that stuff. We had 2 cracks and a failing drain field that we saw in the initial 20, and somehow no problems in the other 17. Like, we fully expected to have another 2 tanks to replace and another drain field, but we got very lucky with that. We also installed filters where there weren't before, so that's helpful with like grease or stuff like that people tend to put down the sinks that they should not. So yeah, we had 2 cracked tanks, those got replaced, and then a tear lift. So this is a pretty cool thing. If a drain field is failing, the septic companies basically tell you, you need a new drain field. That's expensive and it takes up more land. So you can't put a drain field where there was a drain field because you have all the pipes in place. So you actually have to go to different land to do that. Well, there's something called a tear lift that actually, it's this, on the right images, it's the middle machine there. It basically creates almost like a miniature earthquake or something like that. And it basically creates new places for the water to go as it's being absorbed by the land. So it kind of like resets your drain field, which is really awesome. And for people who are less familiar with septic tanks, basically the way it works is all of the sewage and the water from sinks and all of that in your house, they go to a tank. That's where the solids stay, and then the water goes through the drain field, which then gets absorbed by the ground around it. And if you have like bad soil or over time, or you're oversaturating, then you can have problems with your drain field, and they may need to be replaced or maybe tear lifted. Right. So part of this was we paid for it before we closed, and part of it we paid for after. Shay says, are the streets gravel or asphalt? They are gravel. They are gravel streets. And I would say a lot of the parks that we look at are gravel. Nicer parks may be paved, but a lot of them are gravel. And here's a picture. The next slide is on the roads. So we did have to do, road repairs. There were some bad potholes in the roads. There was like a trench in the middle of the road. The entryway was all terrible. In fact, we noticed that there were mailboxes in some places throughout the park, yet there was a central sort of mailbox location up at the top, right at the entry. It turns out that the mail carrier knew the roads were so bad, or he was sick of driving down them. So he told Betty he wasn't driving in the park anymore, and he would only go to the front of the park. So rather than fix the roads, she installed new mailboxes. I guess that saved her some money. So we went in and fixed the roads. And then we also put up signs. So we put up a sign, you can see at the top there, just Wilkesboro Acres and the number. And then we also put up like a speed limit sign, which was at the request of our insurance agent. And then got the roads fixed up. Michael says, were the tenants on a lease or month to month? Great question. So the tenants were not on leases. There were verbal leases, which is very typical. In fact, we're closing on a park next month over in Hickory, also verbal leases. That is very common. So we had to go in, we created our own lease, with a lawyer out in that area, and made everybody sign it. We made everybody sign it, or we said that they were getting evicted, because you have to have leases. So we went ahead and did that. And we want month to month leases. So I know that sounds a little bit different than a lot of people would think, like, oh, if I get them on a year lease, that's actually better. In the mobile home park space, the reason you'd want somebody on a year lease is so they don't leave. You can't move the homes. It's too expensive to move the homes. A lot of them are so old, they can't even physically be moved. So them getting up and leaving is not the concern. The concern is actually the other way around. If you have a tenant that's just causing a disturbance, you don't have to tell them why, but you can just non-renew their lease. So you actually you keep more of the power in that case if you do month-to-month leases, and that you can just choose to non-renew. Whereas if you did a whole year, you couldn't do that up until a year. So in mobile home parks, it's actually beneficial to have month-to-month. Okay. All right, so I do have our financials up here. So obviously, these are real numbers and they're confidential. So, please don't like screenshot and share this or anything like that. But we put out of pocket $158,000. That was a 20% down payment, getting to closing of 23,000. So that would be part of that septic work we talked about, as well as, lawyer fees, other due diligence type items, that sort of stuff. And then the turnaround items after we close. So all of that was 158,000 out of pocket. For this park, we did, that was our own money out of pocket. We didn't bring investors in for that. In the first year that we had it, so as we mentioned, we closed in April, we started taking returns around August or something like that. But for the April through December timeframe, we took 4,500, which is a little less than 3% in the first year. If you annualize that, since it was just April through December, it was like 3.8%. And then as in 2020, we'll be pulling out 38,000 about, which is a 24% cash on cash return. And then next year it'll be about 42,000 or a little over 26% cash on cash return. It's sort of unbelievable. And, just to make it clear, this is net of everything, including reserves. And so this is what we're actually owner drawing. Essentially, it's like the salary for being the owner at the park. Okay, and then the end game. So we've talked about investing, actually purchasing it, what we did to add value to it, and then what is the end game for this? We have two things in mind. The first thing is to do a cash out refi at year 3, so in about another year and a half. Conservatively, the value is around 800 at this point. The loan to value of a new loan would be, let's say, 80%. The principal balance remaining at that year 3 is about 420. So we would take a cash out refi where we'd get 216,000 out when we closed. And so at that point, that's obviously more than the 158 we put in. So then all of the returns after that would just be an infinite return on investment. And then, of course, at that point, it'll be a higher loan balance. So the mortgage will be higher. So the actual cash, the owner draw that we would take out on a monthly basis would go down. So it wouldn't be 42,000 a year anymore. It would go down to about 28,000 a year. But again, that's with taking all the money that we put in plus some back out. And then the second option is to sell it at the 3-year point or exchange it. Hopefully that's still a thing. And at an 800,000 valuation, 6% broker costs plus other closing costs, about 50,000, and we'd get out 327 at close, which would make a total return between the monthly draws, the quarterly draws, and the sale of 254, which would put it at an average annual return of 53%, which is pretty crazy. I never thought that would actually be possible. Michael's okay, got that. All right. So I have questions that we get asked all the time. I'm happy to go through those, or jump in with whatever questions you guys have. We can start on these. Are the returns typical? I don't think so. I think we got super lucky in the timing. I would expect more in like the 18 to 20% all in range. Like obviously in the first year, it's going to be lower, right? And then it increases every year after you buy it. A lot of the value comes from the sale for these types of assets when it's value add, right? Like you get some return all along, but then a lot of it comes in that big chunk that gets returned, and then you spread that, you know, to get your average return, you sort of spread that over the life of the property. And I would expect for other stuff that we're underwriting, especially as mobile home parks have gotten more and more popular, we're seeing things like 10% cash on cash over a 5-year hold, and I guess 16% average return on investment at the, you know, after, that was over a 5-year hold, which obviously with a 5-year hold, that's a bit more conservative. I'll note it doesn't take as long to turn around these parks as it does an apartment building. You don't have to go in and do all the renovations and stuff like that. So it's a little bit more clean cut. It gets, you know, it's a year and a half. Our park has been stabilized for a while. We could have done the stabilization in probably 3 months if we wanted, other than the rent increases. And then in the apartment building space, one thing I'll just say there is it's easier. Like, I guess we're kind of getting down to the last one now, like the, I skipped on you guys. How is it different than apartment investing? Like the returns in apartment investing are not as high as in mobile home parks. You know, typically, I'm sure there's some apartment out there that's just killing it, but it's also easier. So in apartment investing, you can get a third party property management company to come in. They have their own systems, they have leases, they have, you know, late notices, rent management software, all the things. That does not exist in the mobile home park space. You are the system creator. So we're hiring a manager, we're telling him exactly how things need to be done. Like we literally had to record a video on how to read a meter, how to put the readings, you know, up to the third party company, how to give, when to give notices, how to give notices, how to collect rent, how to remind people when they don't, like everything, all those systems have to be created by you as the owner. So it's a little bit of a trade-off there between, you know, higher return, but also higher work. So if anybody ever says like, I want to get into a passive investment, mobile home parks are not a passive investment unless you're like a limited partner in a syndication. And that way they would be. But if you are actively the one doing it, there's a lot of asset management that goes into it. How do you handle insurance as a result of bad weather that would damage the property? Yeah, so we have insurance, including rent, like loss of rent insurance. So that you would need to definitely get insurance that included loss of rent. Obviously, we don't own the homes, but even if you don't own the homes, the people who own them will just leave if, you know, there's like a hurricane or something. So be very careful where you invest. And with mobile home parks, like we just got, this investor sent me something over the weekend that looked great. He was getting a good deal on it. It was a 100 lot portfolio in Florida, but it was like in a terrible location that with any hurricanes, which they got hit by a lot of hurricanes, the homes would not be there. The septic systems would be flooded. It's just not something that we're willing to take the risk in. So I think, you know, making sure you buy in the right location and you have insurance to cover that stuff. Expenses are, I think our expense ratio is closer to about 50%, Michael, unless you're also including like reserves. So why, you know, why mobile home parks, the returns are a little bit higher. I also really like the affordable housing component. There's the amount of affordable housing available is just nowhere near the needed amount of affordable housing. So that having an asset class and that high of demand is very good. And then, like we talked about earlier, the homes don't leave. It's very rare for a home to be taken out of a park. In fact, the park that we're closing on next month, one investor owns 4 of the homes in there. He's not going to be happy when we go and raise rents on day 1. He'll probably threaten to remove his homes. Will he remove his homes? No, right? He's not going to pay 20 something thousand dollars to move these 4 homes somewhere else. It's just not going to happen. So if he really throws a huge fit, then we'll offer to buy them from him and then sell them to either the people living in them now or new people and put them on notes. So again, they're back on somebody else to own that, and we're collecting the lot rent. And what does a mobile home park or owner actually own? The infrastructure is the big piece, right? The septic systems, the water lines, the sewer lines, electrical to a point where there are actually, like electrical pads that allow you to be hooked up, and those need to be in working order. And just like you would at a residential property, like anything past the meter of the city's water line, like you would own anything in the park past that. And then back to Evan's question of park-owned homes versus tenant-owned homes, you may own some, you may own some homes. We don't want to own any of the homes. Some investors like to own the homes because you can charge more rent then. I don't like that as a model for us because we want to own a lot of lots. And there's just a different system you really have to put in place to be able to own homes, and then you have to take care of leaks and take care of tenant turnover and all that stuff. We don't want that as part of our system, so we much prefer just the lot rents. All of our tenants own their own homes, and like I was just saying, if they didn't, we would basically sell the homes to them and ensure that they got over to the tenants to own, and we would finance that for them. So they would basically make a note payment to us. And that way we still don't have to deal with leaks and all that sort of stuff. Do I own homes in someone else's park? Well, sort of. No, we own our gateway drug to mobile home parks was individual mobile homes, and specifically something called a Lonnie deal. You guys may have heard of that. It's essentially where you buy a mobile home from somebody who needs to sell it, just like any other real estate thing, right? You get a good deal on that, and then you turn around and sell it, and you carry the note. So we have a couple of mobile homes in parks here in Raleigh where we are the note holders. So we're the bank, and the people who own the homes pay us. Those are literally at an 18% interest rate. So that was the first time that we were like, holy crap, there's something here in mobile home park space. And that's sort of how we got into mobile home parks. So yes, we don't own homes in other people's parks, but we have notes on homes in other people's parks. Can the insurance company require a certain wind zone rating? I don't know. Our insurance company does not. Can they? Of course, insurance companies are crazy, right? They can decide whatever they want. Probably if they were park-owned homes, they would care more about specific wind zones than tenant-owned homes. I don't believe that's a specific requirement in ours. If an investor owns the homes, the tenant pays to the park, essentially like a ground lease, and then also pays rent to the homeowner. I believe what they do is the investor pays a lot rent to us and just rents out the home like any other rental. So they would just have a rental lease, and the people living in there, the tenants, would just pay them like any other home, no different than a stick-built home. If the tenant owns their own home, does that mean they generally bought it from a previous owner? Yes. Or have they just been there since the park opened? Sometimes. No, Evan, these are awesome questions. Yes, almost always they bought it from somebody else and they have not been there for that long. Sometimes they have, but I think that's one of the best features of, like, the homes cannot move, right? Like, I know I've said that a couple of times, like, they're just not going to move. What happens is, if people want to move, they have to keep paying the lot rent until they find somebody to buy their home from them. And then that new person will apply and start paying the lot rent. So from our perspective, it's more fluid because we just keep getting that lot rent the whole time. There's not really like a vacancy. Are there specific inspectors you use when doing due diligence? Yes, Becca, and that was a very difficult thing. My husband had a very hard time finding people who were willing to do what we needed. By the way, as you can imagine, there aren't but so many places with 37 septic systems all at one time. So when we said, hey, we want you to do a septic inspection, they're like, what are you talking about? What do you want? Right. So it was a learning to figure out how to describe what it is that we want. What is a water inspection that we want? Like, we're actually going to camera the lines at the Hickory Park that we're buying to see if there are any tree roots in the lines. For the electrical, we have somebody come and make sure that those hookups are good. See if any, I forget what the name is for those, but it's like an electrical pad or something like that. They have to, want to make sure that a home can actually be hooked up to it. So really doing that. And any company who does installations of septic systems and pumping, like, if they do those two things, they'll be able to do an inspection. You may just have to explain to them what it is that you want done. Is this what I do full time? Not yet. My husband does it full time. I currently still have a W-2 job until we have enough lots, and then I'll be quitting as well. How do you fill vacancy? It sounds like it's a big deal to get someone to move a new house in. Yeah, Evan, that's a great question. We look for houses on, we're not filling in the 5 vacant lots in our current property. There's a trade-off between the city wanting us to add a trash service, which is $500 a month, versus the rents we would get for those vacant lots. And so it doesn't make sense to do all that work to net like $200 a month. In the park we're buying in Hickory, we will be infilling 3 lots. And luckily from the stuff we were doing with Lonnie Deals, we have experience like trying to find homes. Facebook Marketplace is a really good place to find homes. Craigslist, sometimes it's really hit or miss though. But Facebook Marketplace is a pretty good spot if you're looking for that. And you can get homes. A lot of times if somebody has a home they need to sell on land, it's because they want it gone so they can build a stick-built home on that land. And so they don't really care about the home. So you can usually get a pretty good price on it. Yes. Oh yeah, Evan. You can advertise, and we plan to do this. Hey, 6 months free lot rent, which we would really do is like a 50% discount for a year if you bring in your home. We will advertise that, but people don't really do that. It's costs a lot of money. It costs somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000 to actually move a home from one location to another and get it set up. You have to connect to the sewer, connect to the water, connect to the electric, build your porch back, right? There are things that have to be done. You have to tie it down, put skirting on. It costs a lot of money. So most people who are residents in a mobile home park just don't have the money to move the homes and get them reset up. So we do plan on having to do that ourselves and getting them set up and then putting them on notes. Cool. How do you handle disputes among tenants and crime? We don't, honestly. The property manager is there to be the first line of defense. Like, certainly they're not calling Jonathan. He is in the background. The property manager is the face of the park, but we tell him, like, if people are complaining about speeding or they're complaining about noise, call the cops. Right? We are not in law enforcement. Now, we do have rules, we enforce the rules, we want an orderly park, we want a park where people feel safe, and everybody deserves a safe place to live. So we do make sure it's a safe park. But as far as kind of petty things like that, call the cops. We are not law enforcement, and we certainly do not want to get in the middle of loud music or other things like that. Was your property manager already there? No, Betty was managing the park herself. And we wanted to get somebody who lived in the park to be the park manager. We did not find anybody qualified in the park to be a park manager. We had some guy who almost got evicted and was like fighting with us, then say, hey, do you have that opening for a park manager role still? I'm like, no, we're good, thank you. We have a local guy who lives nearby and comes and does it, and he gets paid, I want to say like all in, it's something like $500 a month. We pay him like $200 or maybe $350 base price plus $6 per rent that's collected. And then we give him a $25 bonus if all rents are in by the 11th of the month. How do you find a mobile home park property manager? Honestly, we looked on Craigslist. We did look in the park first. We had a virtual assistant doing it for the first 6 months, coupled with somebody who would come on the ground and like read the meters and give late notices. And that was okay, but we like having somebody on site, just having one person better. But looking for somebody who's comfortable talking with people, can follow instructions, can physically do the job, because in our park it's reading meters. So, being able to physically do that is important. But we don't expect them to have, like, he's not good with technology. We try to get him to not have to use Google Sheets and that type of stuff, because it's just, it's not really necessary to hire somebody with that skill set to manage the park. Cool. Feel free to ask any other questions that you have. Here's my contact information. Feel free to reach out. I do have this case study on my website. If you want to go get it there, it's at voyageinvesting.com. If you're interested in following what we're doing, you can join our investor circle, and we send out stuff. Is your ownership through an LLC or some other entity? We own this park through one LLC. We have another LLC for our notes and rental property. And sometimes if we find, we're doing a lot of cold calling, so we'll find parks that are too small for what we want, and then we'll assign those to other investors. So that also happens in the other LLC. So we have those two, and then we have a holding company that's the Voyage Investing is the holding company that sits over those, and they're technically 3 separate LLCs.
Awesome. Last chance. Any more questions? Get them in now, y'all. Otherwise, wow, Amanda, thank you so much. That was informative. And
thanks, guys. And if you have any other questions, feel free to let me know. If you're actually going to purchase a park and you just want a second set of eyes or anything like that, please reach out. Don't be afraid to reach out. I literally had an investor. I got put in touch with an investor a couple months ago who was about to buy a park. He was already under contract, and he's like, talking about how to do the due diligence. And I asked him, okay, well, is it on city sewer? And he was like, I'll ask the broker. And I was like, oh God, you should know that before you give an offer. That's a big deal. I was trying to be calm. And then he asked me, what is the alternative if it's not on city sewer? I was like, oh gosh, you shouldn't be doing this, man. So make sure if you have questions, reach out and definitely do research before jumping in, because it is, especially with the infrastructure piece, of septics, and some of them have wells. We don't do ones with wells, but a lot of them do have wells. It's just really important to know what you're getting into.
So that's awesome, Amanda. And you know, that's what we always say. People join TRIA because of the education. And this is a good example of that. But the reason people stay is for the networking. And what Amanda just did is a great example of that, because everyone in TRIA meets you where you are. Everyone is here to lift each other up, not compete with each other. There's so many people willing to help you. So that's what we're all about. And thank you, Amanda, so much. And we'll see you again very soon.
And yes, Tim, we do assign smaller parks to other investors. If you're interested, you can send me an email and I'll put you on our list when we do have a park. Cool. Thank you, guys.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Thanks, Amanda.
Thanks.
All right.
That was a lot.
That was a lot.
It's good.
Yeah, she was great. All right. Anything we need to talk about?
I'll send out an email, Kathy. I was sitting here thinking like, because I know the mentoring, we're having a hard time getting folks, but I was thinking about maybe doing like a Sunday evening chat, like with, say like Sunday evening chat with Lionel regarding GC, rehas, blah, 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 blah. It's sort of a way of mentoring, but you know,
Yeah.
fee that we can charge them. And, you know, we probably, if we do it Zoom, we probably get quite a few people on that. So something I was thinking about just sitting here.
That's a great idea. You know what else I was thinking, Lionel? If I could manage to get the proposal together for the rehab rescue, we could go to the two people who are registered for prep rehab and say, it's changing to this. And you could be in at like that top level, or you can get give them the chance to switch into that, be part of the team level, or they could get a refund. Maybe we'd keep them. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I was just brainstorming because I know 10K, most folks are like, oh, but if we charge them like $250, $300 for like a 6-week, 7-week session or something like that, then
Yeah.
it's something I was thinking about. So we'll see.
I think just right now, for whatever reason, people aren't spending those big bucks.
Yeah.
So we just need to find a model that fits what they do. Like it seems like when we do the little $500 classes, they'll sign up all day long.
It's not about being long. So
That's how we do it. That's how we do it.
Yep. Oh. All right.
All right. See y'all.
All right. Take care.
Bye.